The Xoreth had traveled across the stars, conquering countless worlds, their reputation as ruthless and powerful predators preceding them wherever they went. They had faced other species before, each one trembling in fear as they arrived. Their culture, built on strength and survival, valued one thing above all: dominance. For years, they observed Earth, learning about humanity's behavior, and what they found confirmed their assumptions. Humans were carnivores, just like many other species in the galaxy, and they fought for dominance, survival of the fittest. This made the Xoreth believe that humans would be easy to conquer. The Xoreth sent their fleet, landing near Earth's largest cities, ready for war. Commander Hale stood in front of a massive crowd of soldiers and civilians, her face calm and confident. As the first Xoreth shuttle descended from the sky, she didn't order an attack. Instead, she raised her hand, signaling for peace. The human military and defense forces stood by her, weapons lowered. The Xoreth soldiers in their bulky, armored suits stepped out of their ships, their eyes scanning the humans below. What they expected was fear, panic, or even aggression. Instead, they were met with calm. "Welcome to Earth," Commander Hale said, her voice steady. Her eyes locked on the alien commander leading the Xoreth. Her voice echoed across the vast field, but the words were unexpected. Peaceful, not threatening. A small group of humans, including doctors, engineers, and medics, stepped forward. They carried medical supplies and food, offering them to the Xoreth soldiers who stared in confusion. The Xoreth were not accustomed to kindness, especially not from carnivores like humans. They were used to the creatures they conquered being terrified, begging for mercy. But these humans were different. They did not plead for their lives. They didn't even raise their weapons. Instead, they offered help, as if they had nothing to fear. A young Xoreth soldier hesitantly took a small food package from a human and sniffed it, unsure of what to make of this strange gesture. He had never seen anything like it. He expected to taste something cruel and dangerous, something made for war. But the food was simple, fresh, nutritious, and made with care. It wasn't the poison he expected, but a gift of peace. The soldier looked back at his commander, a sense of doubt creeping into his mind. Commander Krillek, the leader of the Xoreth invasion force, stepped forward. He was strong and imposing, his face hardened by years of war. But even he couldn't ignore the strange feeling settling in his chest. This was not what he had expected. The humans were not like the beasts they had assumed them to be. "Why are you offering us this?" he demanded, his voice low, filled with suspicion. Commander Hale smiled, though the expression was tired, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. "Because we believe there's more to life than just fighting," she said. "We believe in peace, in helping each other. You don't have to destroy us to survive." The Xoreth commanders exchanged confused glances. Could it be true? Could humans really be different from all the other species they had conquered? The first seed of doubt was planted, though neither side knew it yet. But Commander Krillek felt it deep within him, the tiniest flicker of uncertainty. He couldn't understand it, but he knew one thing for sure. This encounter was unlike any he had experienced before. The invasion had begun, but already things were not going as the Xoreth had planned. And neither side could have predicted just how much the humans' unexpected kindness would change everything. After the first peaceful encounter, the Xoreth were left shaken. The humans had offered them food and help, not out of fear, but out of kindness. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Still, they couldn't shake their instincts. The Xoreth were warriors, conquerors, and they knew how to crush any species that dared to stand against them. To them, kindness was either a weakness or a trick, one they could not afford to fall for. But Commander Krillek had begun to wonder. He had never seen a species that behaved like this, and it made him uneasy. Despite his doubts, the Xoreth war machines moved forward. The invasion was far from over. They gathered their forces for what they believed would be the final push. Earth's leaders tried to hold the peace, but the Xoreth were relentless. Commander Hale, understanding the danger, knew that the next days would be critical. She stood firm, determined to prevent a war, but also preparing for the worst. Human soldiers stood guard at the borders of their cities, watching the Xoreth forces carefully. The air was thick with tension. The humans' kindness had been offered, but it had not been accepted. The Xoreth still believed that peace was just a trick. And yet, as the days passed, something unexpected happened. The humans did not retaliate. Instead, they continued to act in ways the Xoreth could not understand. They helped the injured, took in refugees from surrounding countries, and continued to offer aid. The Xoreth grew confused. They had expected humanity to fight back with violence, to show fear or anger, but instead, they were met with what appeared to be unwavering calm. The humans' response was not one of rage, but of resilience. Even their soldiers, trained for battle, did not act with cruelty. They fought only when necessary and always with restraint. It made no sense to the Xoreth. They believed that a true carnivore would never hesitate, would never hold back. And yet, here were humans, creatures they thought they knew, acting with a calmness that left them puzzled. At the same time, Commander Krillak could not deny the feelings growing inside him. As the days wore on, he began to see the humanity in the humans. They did not fight out of rage, but out of necessity, to protect their homes. There was something strange about the way they saw the world. It wasn't about conquering or defeating others. It was about living, about helping those in need, and about surviving without losing their integrity. The more Krillak watched, the more he began to question his mission. Was this truly the way of the universe? Was domination the only answer? One evening, Krillak stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching a human soldier tend to one of his own soldiers who had been injured during a skirmish. The human soldier didn't show anger or hatred. He just helped, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Krillak felt something stir inside him, a strange pull, as though the very core of his being was being tested. His second-in-command, a gruff Xoreth named Xeruk, stood beside him, watching the same scene. "They're weak," Xeruk muttered. "They won't survive." Krillak's eyes stayed on the human soldier, his mind swirling with confusion. "Are they really?" he whispered. Xeruk turned to him sharply. "What are you saying, Krillak? These humans are just prey. We can crush them." Krillak didn't answer immediately. His eyes never left the human soldier, who was now offering his hand to the Xoreth soldier in a gesture of peace. Krillak's heart beat faster, his mind struggling with the unfamiliar emotions stirring inside him. He had come to Earth to conquer, but now, for the first time, he wasn't so sure. The Xoreth were waiting, ready to strike. The humans were standing firm, offering peace even in the face of danger. It was clear, neither side was willing to back down, but for different reasons. The standoff between them had only just begun, and neither the Xoreth nor the humans knew what the future would hold. But Commander Krillak's thoughts were beginning to shift, and that alone might be the first sign that this war was not going to go as planned. The days passed, and the standoff between the humans and the Xoreth continued. The Xoreth, despite their strength and advanced technology, began to feel something they had never experienced before: uncertainty. The humans refused to act with violence, instead continuing their peaceful efforts, offering help to those in need, whether they were allies or enemies. The more the Xoreth observed, the more they began to question everything they had assumed about Earth. Commander Krillak could not shake the nagging feeling in his chest. As he watched human families caring for each other, their soldiers protecting the weak, and their leaders standing firm without the need for cruelty, something inside him shifted. It was small at first, just a quiet whisper in his mind, but it grew louder with each passing day. Xeruk, his second-in-command, was growing impatient. The Xoreth had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. They believed humans were just another species to be dominated, just another prey to be hunted. But now, after days of observing, Jarek's frustration was clear. "These humans are weak," Jarek grumbled. "They are not like us. We should have crushed them already. This is a waste of time." Krelak, however, was no longer so sure. He had seen humans do things that made no sense in the Xoreth's worldview. He had watched a human medic treat an injured Xoreth soldier with more care than they would have shown one of their own. He had seen a human child offer food to a wounded enemy soldier, even though the Xoreth had been their attackers. These acts of kindness were completely foreign to him. It wasn't just the humans' behavior that confused him, it was the strength behind it. The Xoreth had always believed that power came from domination, from the ability to crush others. But here, the humans were showing something different, a strength that came from their ability to give, to care, and to endure. It was a strength built not on fear, but on hope. The more Krelak thought about it, the more the seeds of doubt began to grow. He couldn't understand it. How could a species survive by being kind? How could they be strong if they didn't fight with all their might, if they didn't destroy their enemies without mercy? The Xoreth had always believed that survival meant domination, but here were the humans, showing him a different way. One evening, as Krelak stood alone on a ridge overlooking the human city, he watched as a group of human volunteers delivered food and medical supplies to refugees from a nearby war-torn country. They did not look afraid. They didn't act like prey. They were helping others, even though the situation was dire. Krelak could see the determination in their eyes, the same look he had seen in his own soldiers before a battle. But there was something else, something he couldn't place. It wasn't fear or anger. It was something deeper. It was resolve, but also compassion. He had never seen such a thing before, and it left him unsettled. Krelak's thoughts were interrupted by Jarek's harsh voice behind him. "What are you looking at, Commander? They are weak. We should be attacking, not watching them waste time on these pointless gestures." Krelak turned to face Jarek. His mind was in turmoil, but he kept his voice steady. "It's not a waste of time, Jarek. They're stronger than you think." Jarek laughed bitterly. "Stronger? You're beginning to sound like them, Krelak. They will fall. We just need to push harder." Krelak shook his head slowly, his eyes distant. "Maybe. But if we push too hard, we may find something we didn't expect." Jarek stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Krelak didn't answer right away. He didn't know if he fully understood himself. All he knew was that everything he had believed about the Xoreth's way of life was starting to feel wrong. The humans had shown him a new kind of strength, one that didn't rely on destruction, but on cooperation, care, and resilience. For the first time, Krelak was not sure if the Xoreth's way was the only way. A part of him was beginning to wonder if there was more to survival than simply conquering, and that thought terrified him. The seeds of doubt had been planted in his heart. Now the question was, would they take root, or would he silence them in favor of the old ways? The tension between the humans and the Xoreth reached its breaking point. For days, Commander Krelak had struggled with his growing doubts about the mission. The Xoreth had come to Earth to conquer, to prove their strength by overpowering another species. But the more he saw of humanity, the more confused he became. He had never known a species to fight so fiercely for peace, to show such resilience through kindness and unity. It made no sense. One night, as the sky grew dark and the hum of Xoreth war machines quieted, Krelak stood alone in his tent, staring at a holographic map of Earth. His thoughts were a whirlwind of conflict. He had come to Earth expecting to crush the humans, but now it felt as though something else was at play, something bigger than any battle. There was a knock at the door, and Krelak turned. His second-in-command, Jarek, stood in the doorway. His face was filled with frustration, his eyes hard as stone. "Commander, we need to act now," Jarek said, his voice rough. "The humans are growing bolder. They're offering peace talks, food, and shelter to every soldier they capture. This is weakness, Krelak. We should strike before they completely disarm us." Krelak remained silent for a moment, staring at the map. He didn't respond right away. Jarek's words were harsh, but they no longer carried the weight they once did. Krelak could feel the change inside him, the shift in his thinking that he couldn't shake. He no longer saw humans as mere prey, something to be hunted and destroyed. They were something else, something powerful in a way that Xoreth had never understood. Jarek's impatience grew. What are you waiting for? We've come all this way. The humans must be wiped out. We cannot show them mercy. Krelak finally turned to face his second-in-command. His eyes were calm, but there was a fire in them, an unfamiliar fire that burned with a quiet intensity. Maybe mercy is not a weakness, Jarek, Krelak said slowly. Maybe it's the strength we've been missing. Jarek blinked in disbelief. What are you talking about? Mercy is for the weak. We conquer. We destroy. Krelak's mind drifted back to the day he had seen the human medic carefully bandaging an injured Xoreth soldier. That soldier had been an enemy, yet the human showed him no hatred. The medic didn't see the soldier as a threat. He saw a life worth saving. Krelak had never understood that before. In his world, life was something to be taken, a resource to be used. But here, on Earth, life was something to be protected. I've watched them. Krelak continued, his voice quieter now. I've seen what they do. They don't fight like us. They don't conquer. They protect. They build. They help each other. They survive not by killing, but by caring. Jarek's face twisted in confusion. What are you saying, Commander? You've lost your way. We are predators. We are meant to dominate. Krelak shook his head. Maybe we're wrong. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Jarek opened his mouth to speak, but Krelak held up a hand to silence him. You don't understand, Krelak said, his tone softening. I thought we were the strongest species in the galaxy. I thought we were the only ones who understood survival. But these humans, they've shown me something different. They've shown me that strength doesn't always come from destruction. It comes from building something better, from lifting others up. Jarek stared at him, his anger bubbling up. You're a fool, Krelak. This is how we lose. This is how we fall. Krelak's heart raced, but he remained calm. Maybe. Or maybe this is how we find something better than endless war. For the first time in his life, Krelak was torn between the way he had always known and the way he now saw before him. The Xoreth believed in power, in domination. But the humans, despite their peaceful ways, were showing him a different path, a path of cooperation, compassion, and hope. Krelak didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. The Xoreth could never go back to their old ways. They were at a crossroads, and the decision he made next would change everything. The revelation had struck him hard, and he knew that whatever choice he made, it would be the hardest one of his life. Would he continue with the invasion, or would he walk away from everything he had known to embrace the strength of humanity's compassion? The answer was not clear, but it was starting to feel like the only choice he could make. The days grew heavier as the tension between the humans and the Xoreth continued to mount. The world had become a battlefield, not just for territory, but for the very hearts and minds of both species. Commander Krelak had come to realize that this was not a simple war to be won with strength or weapons. This was a test, one that would determine the future of his people, and perhaps the future of Earth itself. The humans, despite the constant threat of invasion, showed no signs of fear. In fact, they were growing stronger in their unity. People from all corners of the globe came together, offering aid and assistance to those in need, regardless of their race or background. They didn't retaliate against the Xoreth with violence, but instead continued their efforts to help everyone, even their enemies. It was a kind of strength Krelak had never seen before, and it troubled him. Meanwhile, the Xoreth forces were growing restless. Jarek, more than anyone, believed that the time to act had come. The humans' refusal to fight back aggressively, their kindness in the face of destruction, was only seen as weakness to him. He had been trained his whole life to conquer and dominate, and he believed that any hesitation now would lead to their downfall. Krelak, however, was not so sure. He had begun to understand something in the humans that made him question everything he knew. They fought not with weapons, but with kindness. They protected one another, even their enemies, when they had every right to destroy them. They saw value in life, in saving it, not taking it. As Krelak stood before his war council, the tension in the room was thick. Jarak glared at him, his impatience growing by the second. "Commander, we have wasted enough time. We should strike now. The humans are not prepared for a real fight. They are weak. They do not understand the strength of the Xoreth." Krelak met Jarak's gaze, his expression unreadable. "You are wrong, Jarak," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "They are not weak. In fact, they are stronger than we are." Krelak sighed deeply. He had heard these arguments before, but they no longer rang true in his ears. He had seen too much, witnessed too many acts of courage and compassion from the humans to believe that violence was the answer. "Look around you," Krelak said, his voice rising. "The humans do not fight like we do. They do not conquer and destroy. They create. They heal. They help each other. They do not fight to break others, but to protect what is important. This is strength, Jarak, a strength that comes from something deeper than domination." Jarak's face twisted in anger. "You've lost your way, Commander. These humans are weak, and they must be destroyed before they can become a threat." Krelak shook his head. "You don't understand. We do not have to destroy them. We can learn from them. We can change. We can be better." The room fell silent. The other Xoreth soldiers, once filled with confidence, now looked uneasy. Krelak had always been their leader, their symbol of power. But now his words were unsettling. They had come to Earth believing that might made right, but Krelak's belief in compassion and mercy was shaking the foundation of everything they had ever known. Jarak, his fists clenched, glared at Krelak. "You are a fool, Commander. If we do not conquer now, we will lose everything." Krelak felt the weight of Jarak's words, but they no longer carried the same power. He had seen the human strength, and he could no longer ignore it. He could not, in good conscience, lead his people into a war that would only lead to more destruction. With a heavy heart, Krelak made his decision. "We will not fight anymore. The invasion ends here." The room erupted in disbelief. Jarak, furious, stepped forward. "You are abandoning us. You are abandoning your people," he shouted. Krelak stood firm, his gaze unwavering. "No, Jarak, I am saving us. We do not need to conquer. We can learn to live in peace with each other. I will not lead my people into needless destruction." With those words, Krelak knew his fate was sealed. The Xoreth had always followed the strongest, but now he was no longer sure of what strength truly meant. His decision would either change the course of their future or lead to his downfall. He turned to the others in the room, his voice resolute. "We will reach out to the humans. We will end this war, not with weapons, but with our hearts. It's time for a new path." The room was silent as Krelak left the war council, knowing that his decision was the first step towards something that had never been possible for his people, a future built on peace. But the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Many would doubt him, and some would fight against it. But Krelak was ready to face whatever came next. He had chosen the path of humanity's strength, and he believed it would be the right one. Krelak's decision to end the invasion was met with shock, anger, and confusion. The Xoreth soldiers, once filled with pride and confidence, now murmured amongst themselves. Jarak, still seething with rage, stormed out of the war council chamber, vowing that Krelak's path would lead them to ruin. But Krelak didn't falter. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew it was the only way forward. In the days that followed, Krelak sent messages to the human leaders, offering peace. It was a bold and risky move, and Krellick wasn't sure how they would respond. Would the humans see this as weakness, as Xeric had warned, or would they understand that it was a chance for something new? He had no answers, only the hope that his decision was right. The humans, led by Commander Hale, were cautious but willing to listen. The world's leaders gathered in a neutral zone, where Krellick and Hale met face-to-face for the first time since the invasion began. The tension in the air was thick, but both commanders held their ground. Krellick looked into Hale's eyes and said, "I come not as a conqueror, but as someone who wants peace. I have seen the strength of your people. You fight not with violence, but with compassion. And that is a strength I had never understood. We have been wrong. We should not fight. Let us find another way." Hale studied him closely, her expression unreadable. She had heard the stories of the Xoreth's cruelty, of the devastation they had caused. But she had also seen something different in Krellick, something that made her wonder if there could be hope for peace. "You're asking a lot," Hale said, her voice calm but firm. "You led an invasion. You caused suffering. How can we trust you now?" Krellick nodded, fully understanding her doubts. "I do not expect your trust, but I ask for the chance to prove that we can change. We are not the same as we were. The path of destruction has led us nowhere. I offer peace, not as a surrender, but as a new beginning." For a long moment, Hale said nothing. The silence between them felt heavy, as though the fate of both their peoples rested on her decision. Finally, she spoke again. "We will give you this chance, Commander Krellick," she said. "But the world is watching. If you truly wish for peace, you must show us that your people are ready to change. Words alone will not be enough." Krellick nodded. He understood the weight of her words. He had already begun to realize that peace wouldn't come easily. It would require actions, not just promises. His people would have to prove they were ready to let go of their old ways and embrace something new. The Xoreth would have to change, just as he had. As the meeting ended, Krellick and Hale parted ways, both knowing that the future was uncertain. The Xoreth still had their doubts, and many would resist Krellick's decision, but he was determined to see this through. He had chosen the path of peace, and he would not turn back. Back on the Xoreth ship, Xeric gathered a group of loyal soldiers, his anger still burning. "The commander has gone soft," Xeric growled. "We cannot allow this. We must take control and finish what we started. Krellick is a traitor, and we will not follow him." But Krellick, despite knowing the risks, made his next move. He ordered the Xoreth forces to stand down completely, their weapons to be deactivated. He called for a gathering of Xoreth leaders to discuss the future of their people, one without war, one that embraced the peaceful path he now believed in. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Some Xoreth leaders supported Krellick's vision, but many others remained loyal to the old ways. Xeric and his followers began to challenge Krellick's leadership, pushing for a return to the fight. But Krellick was resolute. He knew that this was the hardest battle he would ever face, fighting against his own people, fighting for the future he believed in. He was no longer the commander who led with force. He was the leader of a new path, one that would require strength not in weapons, but in conviction. Krellick stood at the edge of the command deck, looking out at Earth below. The planet, once a place to conquer, now seemed like a symbol of everything he had come to believe in. Peace, unity, compassion. He didn't know if his people would follow him. He didn't know if the humans would accept the fragile peace he had offered. But for the first time in his life, Krellick felt hope. Hope that change was possible, and that the future could be brighter than the past. The choice had been made. Now he would fight to see it through. The days following Krellick's decision were tense and filled with uncertainty. The Xoreth were divided. Some supported his call for peace, believing that there was a better way forward, while others, led by Xeric, saw him as a traitor. Xeric's influence grew, and a small faction of Xoreth warriors began to rally behind him, determined to restore their old ways of conquest and domination. Despite the growing opposition within his own ranks, Krellick stood firm. He knew that this was the most difficult challenge of his life, but he also knew that the future of his people, and perhaps even the entire galaxy, depended on the choices he made now. There could be no turning back. Meanwhile, the humans were watching closely. Commander Hale, despite her cautious acceptance of Krillek's offer, was still unsure. The world's leaders were divided, some still fearful of the Xoreth, while others saw the possibility of peace. Krillek knew that the humans needed to see more than just words. They needed proof that the Xoreth were truly ready to change. Krillek made his decision. It was time to show the world that the Xoreth could be trusted. He ordered the remaining Xoreth warships to stand down and began dismantling the weapons on his own fleet. It was a powerful symbol, one that would be difficult to undo if the decision was wrong. But Krillek believed it was the only way forward. As he stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the earth below, he felt a mix of fear and hope. He had given everything for this moment, and now, all he could do was wait and see if the humans would believe in him or if his people would rally behind him. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was the only path he could walk. Weeks passed, and the Xoreth forces began to stabilize. Krillek's leadership was challenged by the hardliners, but they could not overcome the momentum he had started. Slowly, the Xoreth began to accept the changes. Those who had once fought against him began to see the wisdom in his decisions. His message of peace, though difficult, was starting to resonate. On Earth, Commander Hale and the world leaders began to take Krillek's efforts seriously. The dismantling of weapons, the ceasefire, and the calls for peace were all seen as signs of a genuine desire for a new future. It wasn't easy, and there were still those who feared the Xoreth, but slowly humanity began to trust. Then the moment came that Krillek had been waiting for. A grand meeting was set to take place, a summit between the Xoreth and human leaders. This was it, the opportunity to truly change the course of history. Krillek stood in front of the gathered leaders, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen so much violence, so much destruction in his life. But today, he would speak not as a warrior, but as a leader who had learned the value of peace. He addressed the human leaders first. "I have led my people into battle for many years," Krillek began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I have seen the destruction that comes from violence, from conquest. But in the humans, I have seen something that has changed my heart. I have seen a strength built on compassion, not force. I have seen a people who fight to protect, not to destroy. And for the first time in my life, I believe there is a better way." The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Krillek turned to face the Xoreth leaders next. "We have lived our lives by a code of conquest, but it has only brought us pain. We are ready to change. The choice is ours, and we choose peace." There was a long pause, and then, one by one, the Xoreth leaders began to speak. Some voiced their doubts, but others, seeing Krillek's unwavering conviction, began to speak in favor of his vision. It was a turning point, and the room seemed to shift as the old way of thinking was slowly replaced by a new hope. Finally, Commander Hale stood. She had listened carefully to Krillek's words, and now there was a sense of cautious optimism in her voice. "We may have a long way to go," she said, "but if you truly believe in this new path, we are willing to work with you. Let us build a future together." Krillek felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in his life, he felt hope for a future without war, without destruction. He had chosen peace, and now, with the humans by his side, he knew that they could build something stronger than any empire. As the summit ended, Krillek looked out over the gathered leaders. The sky above Earth was filled with the soft light of a new dawn, symbolizing the hope that had risen from the ashes of war. The Xoreth and humanity had begun a new journey together, one where strength was measured not by the power to destroy, but by the power to create. For Krillek, it was a new beginning, a beginning of peace, unity, and the strength to change.